Here's your weather authorities forecast first from WTAJ.
Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Christy Shields. We are live here at People's Choice Festival in Boalsburg on the road in Center County. It's a gorgeous afternoon. Let's take a look. We are going to have blue sky and sunshine along with just a few passing clouds into the afternoon hours, and our temperatures today reaching into the 80s, so it is going to be slightly warmer compared to where we were yesterday, but we will continue over the weekend to have those cool starts before we have the warm afternoons.
Live from Center County, this is WTAJ News on the road.
Yes, it is. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day here in Boalsburg on the road in Center County. Welcome to WTAJ News at noon. Casey Cantz, Jordan Tracy, meteorologist Christy Shields, and Cindy Rocky. Thank you, Cindy, for joining us, co-president.
Actually, co-director.
Co-director.
I'd like to be a president.
You have a hand in running the People's Choice Festival each and every year. Is that safe to say?
That's safe to say. John and I have been running the show since about 2006, I think.
Wonderful. You look around here today, and you got some good weather. Thank you to Christy. You see all these people walking through. What are some of the things that they come here to see? What sort of things does People's Choice Festival offer?
Well, we have 109.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Bianca Golodriga reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York. Good day. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are meeting Queen Elizabeth for tea at Windsor Castle outside of London. The Queen will now have met 11 of the past 12 U.S. presidents, Lyndon Johnson being the only exception. Quite an arc in her monarchy. In an interview with the Sun newspaper, Mr. Trump called Elizabeth a tremendous woman. In that same interview, he criticized Prime Minister Theresa May's handling of Britain's exit from the European Union. Though today, he told reporters May is doing a fantastic job. You are looking at video of the president arriving right now at Windsor Castle to meet with Queen Elizabeth. She is 92 years old. Her husband, incidentally, Prince Philip, at 97, has retired from public life and is not expected to be joining them. First Lady Melania Trump approaching as well. And you will see them shaking hands. British men usually bow their heads and British women curtsy, but the Trumps don't have to because they are Americans. Other nationalities do not have to extend that same courtesy. As we mentioned, this is the 11th U.S. president that Queen Elizabeth has met and welcomed in England. You see the first couple, Melania Trump and Donald Trump, there with the Queen taking their photos. Her Majesty will welcome the Trumps in the quadrangle of the castle. An honor guard will give a royal salute to God Save the Queen, which is what you're hearing now. That will be followed. There you hear actually the U.S. national anthem. The honor guard was already played. Let's take a listen. There you heard the U.S. national anthem. The President and the First Lady will now join the Queen for tea inside the castle. We don't know exactly which room inside the castle the tea will be held. There are roughly 1,000 rooms inside the castle, but the Queen's sitting room, we're told, is one possibility. I want to go to Charlie D'Agata, who is there at Windsor Castle. Charlie, obviously for our viewers, Windsor Castle was site of the wedding to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle not so long ago. Quite a different event being held today. The 11th President of the United States that Queen Elizabeth will be meeting. Quite impressive.
Yes, it is, and it is a different occasion, certainly a different atmosphere here. Now, other than people, the well wishes that we saw at the wedding, there are a few hundred people out here. Some of them have just come to take a look. There are some protesters here as well. And as you described moments ago, we saw the helicopter land on the grounds of the castle. As you said, many rooms to choose from where she's going to be serving that tea. They're only here for about 45 minutes. This really is a flying visit, but it is one that the Trumps were looking forward to. The president, as you said, has praised the Queen as being a tremendous woman and saying that the First Lady is a big fan. Now, in terms of protocol, as you pointed out, they are American citizens. There's no need to bow. There's no need to curtsy. They're also the head of state. But that's also important on the other side of those castle walls because the Queen is the head of state. So it is fully within her remit, as it were, to go ahead and discuss the politics and events of the day with President Trump. But it is absolutely a personal rule with the Queen that whatever they discuss doesn't leave the castle walls. So 45 minutes, they're here. You heard the national anthem just now. They will be inspecting the troops. Then they're here for a spot of tea, essentially, and then they're on their way out.
Yeah, President Trump said he was very much looking forward to his meeting with the Queen. The Queen, as we know, is very well read in on the news of the day and the matters of what's happening, not only in her own country with politics and Brexit, but obviously what's happening around the world. So it should be fascinating if we could be a fly on the wall to sit in on that meeting. This is not her first rodeo, as we mentioned. Charlie, you actually reported a piece for us this morning about the different relationships that Queen Elizabeth has cultivated with various U.S. presidents, some closer than others, but images of the Queen along with President Reagan doing what they both love to do, and that was horseback riding. Clearly, we're not going to be seeing that with this Queen and President Trump today, but it's still a marvel at 92 years old that she is in such incredible shape and will be hosting the president, as you mentioned, for 45 minutes.
Yes, you know, when you speak to royal biographers, they say this woman is a person after all. And most importantly, she wants to make people feel at home, which seems so foreign to us. When you look at this castle or you look at Buckingham Palace, you think, well, how can that be? But it is that type of person who wants you to feel at home. And like any individual, there are certain individuals she got along with a bit better than others. You mentioned Ronald Reagan. Yes, they went horseback riding here at Windsor Castle. As a matter of fact, President Reagan was the first to spend the night here, the first U.S. president to spend the night here. So that relationship developed over time. When she went to the United States, she stayed with the Reagans. Also, George Bush Sr., he has visited here. They're about the same age, so they got along well. She took him on a tour of Buckingham Palace, and then he returned the favor, giving her a tour of the White House. She got along very well, famously well, with President Bill Clinton. Now, there's one little aside. When the Queen Mother was still alive, President Jimmy Carter had actually, a bit overfamiliar, had leaned in for a kiss to the Queen Mother. She actually said afterwards, she said, nobody's done that since my long passed away husband. Yeah, she had a good sense of humor about that.
It is fascinating to look back through this history and recall that the first president the Queen met in her life was actually President Harry Truman in 1951. Of course, she was a 25-year-old princess at the time. Her father was monarch. Charlie, we're going to toss back to you, though, as we see them off to their lunch, their tea, in just a moment.
Yep, 66 years. That's a lot of presidents having come and gone. And what I've been speaking to, the people who know the Queen better than I do, obviously have said she has a great affinity for the United States, and always has. Since World War II, she remembers how important as a young person the United States was at the time, and she's always had an affinity and a bit of a loyalty. And of course, it's the most important strategic partnership that Britain has. She is the head of state. She appreciates that and realizes that. So yes, there have been different personalities throughout the years, people that she's got along with better than others. Everybody that I've spoken to said she will get along with President Trump too.
Yes, she knows how to handle diplomacy probably better than all. There had been some concern given the president's remarks in an interview that he gave earlier this morning. Given what a busy day it is, we're going to tell you about another developing story here back in the U.S. in Washington. We're going to turn now to the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who's just announced that 12 members of the Russian intelligence have been indicted for hacking into the Democratic National Committee to sabotage election preparations there throughout the elections. Of course, this comes after 13 Russians were indicted back in February 16th. Also Friday, also a surprise announcement, an indictment from Rod Rosenstein. So there you see a split screen. You see the president on the right with Queen Elizabeth, and there you see Rod Rosenstein as we're anticipating to hear from him as well. But once again, want to tell our viewers that back here at home, 12 members of Russian intelligence were indicted, charged with hacking into the Democratic National Committee to sabotage their election preparations as well. This obviously related to the 2016 election, reminding our viewers once again what's taking place in just 3 days, and that is that highly anticipated meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. For more on these indictments, we're going to go now to Paula Reed, who is there at that conference. Paula, what more can you tell us?
That's right. Right now, we are waiting the Deputy Attorney General to come out here and announce this indictment of 12 Russian intelligence officers for hacking related to the 2016 campaign. You ran through several of the headlines there, but one important note is that nowhere in here does it indicate that these intelligence officers coordinated with Americans or that they in any way impacted the voting counts. But this is, as you noted, this is certainly a message ahead of the president's much anticipated meeting with President Vladimir Putin that they will continue to pursue anyone who attempted to interfere in the 2016 election.
Paula, what can you tell us about the timing? As I mentioned, we have the Russia meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump on Monday in Helsinki. Today we heard as he was there side by side with Theresa May, he was asked about whether or not he would bring up the hacking. He said yes, but really seemed to tamper down any sort of expectations as far as what he anticipated Vladimir Putin to say about it.
We can't really speculate about why this is being announced today. We'll certainly ask the Deputy Attorney General why they're announcing this today. But traditionally, when I've talked to people who are familiar with the special counsel's investigation, they say, look, we indict people when we have enough information. We bring the evidence before the grand jury, and they indict when they indict. I think folks will read a lot into the timing of this announcement, because as you said, it's been almost 6 months since the last time he came out and publicly announced one of these indictments.
Yeah, and it's also interesting when the president was asked today what he will be discussing with Vladimir Putin. The election meddling was at the bottom of the list. He talked about Ukraine, he talked about Syria, he talked about North Korea and denuclearization there. But when it came to Russia's meddling in the U.S. election, he really didn't offer much other than saying, yeah, I'm going to bring it up, but this isn't going to be a situation where Vladimir Putin's going to say, yes, I did it.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Here's the Deputy Attorney General.
Okay, and here's the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
Well, good afternoon. Today, a grand jury in the District of Columbia returned an indictment presented by the Special Counsel's Office. The indictment charges 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. 11 of the defendants are charged with conspiring to hack into computers, steal documents, and release those documents with the intent to interfere in the election. One of those defendants and a 12th Russian military officer are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers of organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections. According to the allegations in the indictment, the defendants worked for 2 units of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, known as the GRU. The units engaged in active cyber operations to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. There was one unit that engaged in active cyber operations by stealing information, and a different unit that was responsible for disseminating the stolen information. The defendants used 2 techniques to steal information. First, they used a scheme known as spear phishing, which involves sending misleading email messages and tricking the users into disclosing their passwords and security information. Second, the defendants hacked into computer networks and installed malicious software that allowed them to spy on users and capture keystrokes, take screenshots, and exfiltrate or remove data from those computers. The defendants accessed email accounts of volunteers and employees of a U.S. presidential campaign, including the campaign chairman, starting in March of 2016. They also hacked into the computer networks of a congressional campaign committee and a national political committee. The defendants covertly monitored the computers, implanted hundreds of files containing malicious computer code, and stole emails and other documents. The conspirators created fictitious online personas, including DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0, and they used those personas to release information, including thousands of stolen emails and other documents, beginning in June of 2016. The defendants falsely claimed that DC Leaks was a group of American hackers and that Guccifer 2.0 was a lone Romanian hacker. In fact, both were created and controlled by the Russian GRU. In addition to releasing documents directly to the public, the defendants transferred stolen documents to another organization that is not identified by name in the indictment, and they used that organization as a pass-through to release the documents. They discussed the timing of the release in an attempt to enhance the impact on the election. In an effort to conceal their connections to Russia, the defendants used a network of computers around the world, and they paid for it using cryptocurrencies. The conspirators corresponded with several Americans during the course of the conspiracy through the internet. There's no allegation in this indictment that the Americans knew they were corresponding with Russian intelligence officers. In a second related conspiracy, Russian GRU officers hacked the website of a state election board and stole information about 500,000 voters. They also hacked into computers of a company that supplied software used to verify voter registration information. They targeted state and local officials responsible for administering elections, and they sent spear phishing emails to people involved in administering elections, including attaching malicious software. Now, the indictment includes 11 criminal allegations and a forfeiture allegation. Count 1 charges 11 defendants for conspiring to access computers without authorization and to damage those computers in connection with efforts to interfere with the presidential election. Counts 2 through 9 charge those 11 defendants with aggravated identity theft by employing the usernames and passwords of victims in order to commit computer fraud. Count 10 charges those 11 defendants with money laundering for transferring cryptocurrencies through a web of transactions in order to purchase computer servers, register domains, and make other payments in furtherance of their hacking activities while trying to conceal their connections to Russia. Count 11 charges 2 defendants for a separate conspiracy to access computers without authorization and to damage those computers in connection with efforts to infiltrate computers used to administer elections. Finally, the indictment seeks the forfeiture of property involved in the criminal activity. There is no allegation in this indictment that any American citizen committed a crime. There's no allegation that the conspiracy changed the vote count or affected any election result. The special counsel's investigation is ongoing, and there will be no comments by the special counsel at this time. Assistant Attorney General John Demers is here with me today because we intend to transition responsibility for this indictment to the Justice Department's National Security Division while we await the apprehension of the defendants. Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General Ed O'Callahan is also with me, and he's been assisting in managing the special counsel investigation. I want to caution you that people who speculate about federal investigations usually do not know all of the relevant facts. We do not try cases on television or in congressional hearings. Most anonymous leaks are not from the government officials who are actually conducting these investigations. We follow the rule of law, which means that we follow procedures and we reserve judgment. We complete our investigations and we evaluate all of the relevant evidence before we reach any conclusion. That is how the American people expect their Department of Justice to operate, and that is how our department is going to operate. In our justice system, everyone who's charged with a crime is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. It should go without saying, the people who are not charged with a crime also are presumed innocent. The indictment was returned today because prosecutors determined that the evidence was sufficient to present these allegations to a federal grand jury. Our analysis is based solely on the facts, the law, and Department of Justice policies. I briefed President Trump about these allegations earlier this week. The President is fully aware of the Department's actions today. In my remarks, I have not identified the victims. When we confront foreign interference in American elections, it's important for us to avoid thinking politically as Republicans or Democrats, and instead to think patriotically as Americans. Our response must not depend on which side was victimized. The Internet allows foreign adversaries to attack America in new and unexpected ways. Free and fair elections are always hard-fought and contentious. There will always be adversaries who seek to exacerbate our divisions and try to confuse, divide, and conquer us. So long as we are united in our commitment to the values enshrined in the Constitution, they will not succeed. The partisan warfare fueled by modern technology does not fairly reflect the grace, dignity, and unity of the American people. The blame for election interference belongs to the criminals who committed election interference. We need to work together to hold the perpetrators accountable, and we need to keep moving forward to preserve our values, protect against future interference, and defend America. I have time to take a few questions.
General Rosenstein, quick question for you, sir. Number one, the timing today on the eve of the President's meeting with Putin, can you talk about that? And also, just today, the President described the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. Your response.
The timing, as I mentioned, is a function of the collection of the facts, the evidence and the law, and a determination that it was sufficient to present the indictment at this time. As I mentioned, I did brief the President. With regard to the nature of the investigation, I only comment on the evidence. The evidence that is reflected in our indictments and in our charges represents a determination by prosecutors and agents, without regard to politics, that we believe the evidence is sufficient to justify the charges.
Harry? Yes, Deputy Attorney General, I know you've talked about the fact that, in your view, the evidence doesn't show any votes were changed as a result of this hacking. But you did say that a company used as a pass-through coordinated with these defendants to enhance the timing of the release and the impact on the election. Can you talk a little bit about what the evidence you have shows in that respect?
So what I've talked about today is what is alleged in the indictment. We know that, according to the allegations in the indictment, the goal of the conspirators was to have an impact in the elections. What impact they may have had, or what their motivation may have been independently of what's required to prove this offense, is a matter of speculation. That's not our responsibility. What I said is there's no allegation in the indictment about it, and that's not our charge.
In terms of the state election information, you said about 500,000 voters information was collected. Is there any evidence that what the Russians did with that information? And is there any evidence of other states being successfully penetrated by the Russians?
I think that it's important for you to understand what I've told you are the allegations that are included in the indictment. The FBI and other intelligence community agencies are working constantly to defend against cyber attacks in the United States. This case is just about one particular effort that was made during the 2016 election. The efforts of our department, of the Department of Homeland Security, of other federal agencies, and of all of the state election boards throughout the country are ongoing. And those efforts preceded this indictment, and they're going to post-date this indictment. So we have continued to share any relevant intelligence with all of our partners. It would take a longer time to talk about this, but there is a concerted and organized effort by the federal government to make sure that we do deter and prevent any sort of cyber attacks on our elections, and that we harden our election systems to prevent against any kind of intrusions.
We'll take last question from them. Deputy Attorney General, you mentioned that you briefed President Trump on this earlier this week. Did he indicate his support for this action, and what was his reaction?
I'll allow the President to speak for himself. Obviously, it was important for the President to know what information we've uncovered, because he's got to make very important decisions for the country. So he needs to understand what evidence we have of foreign election interference. Thank you very much.
You said that you were hoping who ordered the attack?
And there you heard the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announce the indictment of 12 Russian nationals who are members of the Russian military intelligence charged with hacking of the DCCC, the DNC, and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. The indictment includes 11 criminal counts. We're going to go to Paula Reed now. Paula, this, of course, comes 5 months after the previous indictment was announced, charging 13 Russians of meddling in the election last February.
That's right. The special counsel has been busy. They have indicted before this. It indicted over 20 people and 3 businesses. So while people have been critical of this, some even calling it a witch hunt, there has been a pretty significant yield from this investigation. And here the Justice Department is involved in a name and shame game. They name names for these Russian intelligence officers who specifically did what. And as you heard the Deputy Attorney General say, there were 2 units. One worked to steal information, the other worked to disseminate it in an effort to impact our election. Though the Deputy Attorney General was quick to note that they did not knowingly coordinate with any Americans, and he argues that this did not have any impact on the total vote count.
Yeah, the Deputy Attorney General also said that the president had been briefed on these indictments as well. You talked about the dissemination of the information that was hacked. It was released as DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0. Obviously, these were names we all became familiar with over the last year and a half as well. The Deputy Attorney General stating that no Americans knowingly were involved here. He was asked about the president's reaction to this. He said he would let the president speak for himself, but obviously he said it was important for the president to know, since the president is the one who's making decisions about any sort of response that the U.S. makes. And Paula, it comes 3 days before the president meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a private closed-door meeting.
That's right. I think a lot of people are going to read into that timing, asking whether or not the Justice Department and special counsel are trying to send a message ahead of that meeting. The Deputy Attorney General, as expected, sort of tamped that down, trying to say, look, we indict people when we have sufficient evidence to bring before the grand jury. Now, it was interesting, though, ahead of the president's trip, he did take time to brief him. It's especially interesting that he took time to brief the president about these allegations before they became public, because, as we know, the president has referred to the special counsel investigation as a witch hunt, and he has flaunted his authority to fire not only the Deputy Attorney General who oversees it, but also Attorney General Sessions over decisions he has made. The president is no fan of this investigation, so it is interesting that the Deputy Attorney General took time to brief the president ahead of his trip.
Yeah, just a few hours ago, the president said there next to Theresa May that it was a witch hunt, as he's been calling this investigation from the get-go. Paula, we're going to have more with you on this developing story tonight on the evening news. And as we mentioned to you, this is a very busy news day. The president is in England having tea right now with Queen Elizabeth, about 30 minutes from Windsor Castle, where that tea is being held. In London, a quite different scene. You've got tens of thousands of protesters. The largest, it's anticipated to be the largest turnout since 2003, the protests over the Iraq War. Liz Palmer is in Trafalgar Square with the latest on these protests. Liz, good day to you.
Hello there. Well, the marchers began assembling around noon, and what looked like a huge group of people walked right down Regent Street, and the crowd was then tens of thousands big. We're now at Trafalgar Square in the very center of London. It's late enough that people are leaving the offices, and the crowd has swelled again. There's heavy security. You may be able to hear the police helicopter. We've got police on horseback all around us. And these demonstrators united in two things. They really very present here on UK soil. They don't think that he should have been accorded the honor of tea with the Queen. And they are also specifically very much opposed to many of his policies. There are placards against his immigration policy, his stance on women, certainly trade. Although it's been a good-natured crowd, it's a very, very intense one.
And Londoners really taking this personally, seeing this as an attack on their mayor as well. Sadiq Khan, obviously the President of the United States, had harsh words for him over the past year and a half when it came to terror in the city of London. The mayor has fought back with his own words. There had been some concern and speculation as to whether the mayor was inciting the balloon that had been floating around of the President, or a balloon looking like the President. We will be following the story tonight as well. Liz Palmer, thank you so much for joining us. Now, to repeat a very busy morning and afternoon, a federal grand jury in Washington has indicted 12 Russian military officers with conspiring to interfere with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. He allegedly hacked into the computers of the DCCC and the Democratic National Committee. We're going to have more on this story tonight on the CBS Evening News, and more on the president's visit in England and Europe as well. Stay with us and have a great day.
For news 24 hours.